most of the people in our scene do exclusively limited run things, and when they're gone, and then the market prices do whatever they do. I try to be the antithesis of that. Every single soft vinyl toy, see, they have jointed parts, arms and legs, and if you want articulation, that's a separate part. Something that's unique to Japanese shows is the one-day license event. They publish a list every year. These are the licenses we have available. For that one day, the thing that you sell is an officially licensed product.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, subscribing is the best way to support us. It helps us grow and bring you new stories from life in Japan. All right, let's jump in. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today in the studio we welcome Cory. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're a toy maker, specifically sofubi, which is a very unique type of Japanese soft vinyl toys that kind of, from what I read, became very popular in the 50s and have a super fascinating story. And you got into this and you're making some really cool figures here, which we will talk about a lot. You're making them under the alias or under your company, Science Patrol, which we'll also talk about how you kind of got to turn this into a company. And like with all my guests, I like to go back to the origin story a little bit of what brought you here to Japan.
So originally, I was obsessed with Japanese video games and obsessed with Japanese toys. Originally, it was we had Power Rangers in the States, and when I found out, and Masked Rider, and when I found out that these were based on Japanese properties, I think it was in the back of a magazine when I was in middle school. They used to have an import video game section, and I saw something that looked like Masked Rider with another guy, and it was for a Japanese import section. It's like, what is this? Ended up finding out later in the late 90s, early 2000s, we actually had internet at the house, like that these things are all based on Japanese tokusatsu. That led me to being able to spot them at flea markets over my hometown in Buffalo. We had a big flea market that occasionally had like Godzilla toys, or in really rare cases, Kamen Rider toys or Super Sentai, like old sofubi, collecting those. And then into college, starting to buy the Ultraman. Like online, they had Bandai Ultra Monster toys. And that led me to discovering independent soft vinyl, which is the industry I work in, where it's an actual designer that comes up with an original design, and then they make these small runs of toys. And the first thing I discovered was this a Meneki Neko. It's the beckoning cat. They had a Cyclops version of it, and I'd never seen anything like that before. And it led me down this rabbit hole of discovering this artist Mori Katsura, who goes by the name Realhead, and everything he makes, and then through him, all these other companies, and then I just became obsessed after that. So pretty much, I think the independent soft vinyl discovery was probably the first year of college for me.
So you actually got interested in Japan through toys. That was kind of like what's kick-started it all.
Yeah, toys and video games.
What was the moment when you kind of started thinking about, I want to live there, I want to move away from Buffalo to Japan?
I had visited in 2007, and I really liked everything about Japan. Of course, that's through the tourist lens of not having to work and not having to actually exist in the culture. But when I was, I think 28 or 27, I started having ideas of how I could actually make living in Japan and doing this type of work actually a reality. I had searched out like, there's all these independent producers, and exactly what you need to get these things started. Like you need a prototype, or you need an idea, and finding out specifically how to get the ball rolling led me to communicating with people that were actually making here, and then linking up with them when I was visiting and trying to make connections to actually be able to find an inroad to start a company here. It wasn't easy, and looking back, I really don't know how I pulled it off, because it was really like right place, right time. But all of the weird walls I thought existed and barriers that prevented people from coming and doing creative jobs in Japan, it seemed to kind of go away when you realized at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that you pay your taxes, and that if you need to have a company to do the thing that you're doing, you can't rely on like an artist visa, or there's no such thing as a toymaker visa. You need to go the business route with it. Then it all kind of became a bit easier.
So your idea was kind of already back then. I want to go to Japan to make those toys.
Yes.
Before we dive into that journey, for people that are not familiar with like sofubi, we have a few on the table that you brought on display. But can you explain a little bit what they are? What's the story behind those?
The figures specifically, or
no, the sofubi in general.
So sofubi is the old slush cast production method that they used to use for dolls, specifically of the tokusatsu kaiju movie variety in the 60s. Originally made for children. They were super durable, the paint was durable, and they were made to be more easily produced than something like a wood or a tin toy. Material price fluctuations, everything kind of changes like post-war. So they end up making these toys, and then later on, like 80s and 90s, then the people that ended up seeing those tokusatsu movies and shows that ended up growing up with that stuff, then started buying the vintage toys. And then there was a boom in the 90s with companies like Bounty Hunter and Secret Base getting into toy production. And then it became a designer thing where these things in this exact same production method, it's the same as it was when they were making the kids' toys. All of that changed to now it's this interesting designer thing, and the things that were kids' toys are now vintage and more expensive. And then they ended up shifting again to trying to not just make it fashion and not just specific designers, but artists and independent creators who had ideas could then start releasing toys of their ideas. Instead of going and having to do mass production, you can do these small group, like you can do like a run of 100 of something or a run of 30 of something, as opposed to in China where you're making thousands.
What exactly does a creation process look like?
So for me, I come up with an idea. I'll usually sketch it out, or a lot of times I'll do collage on my computer, kind of take things and mix them together to see specifically what works proportionally, what works design-wise. Either little illustrations that I do to kind of make up the parts of a creature, or take a concept like for these guys. They're based on a very well-known existing Jomon pottery thing called a shakoki dogu. And the traditional dogu has two eyes, but I thought it'd be fun to take the design, edit it a little bit, and make a two-eyed and a three-eyed one, maintaining the same like traditional Jomon style design with the rope patterning and all that, but make a more interesting design. Kind of like with Realhead doing the Maneki Neko, doing it as a Cyclops was an interesting enough design to get me and several other people into the scene of collecting or wanting to make. But just either small changes to something that kind of makes it more interesting, or for something like these guys, this coffee pot monster, I would take an object and apply principles from something like tokusatsu, where you have kaijin. Kaijin are usually these really elaborate monsters that are humanoid versions of a plant or a big sword with a face or something like that. Just living objects, kind of like Tsukimogami, those like yokai that inhabit like random objects after a certain period of time. But then do them based on, I like the way this thing looks. I want to make a monster form out of it.
You mentioned that it was kind of strongly connected early on already with kaiju, with like the Japanese monsters and these tokusatsu. What is the connection there? How did it come to be that the majority of these sofubi that are being created are all inspired or representing some kind of monster?
So the original ones were based on actual intellectual property. And then a lot of people grew up and saw like, these are monster toys. So people would make, this is my version of a monster. This is my version of a kaiju. This is my version of a kaijin. And that's why a lot of it is still tied to monsters and humanoid monsters and robots as well. There's a lot of stuff with robots. And even though people will have like ideas for new designs, there's so many that are just, it's another type of monster. And it feels like it's all because they saw the original ones, or people experience like, these are always monster toys. They need to be monsters. They can only be monsters.
So the original IPs you're referring to, I think like Godzilla or Ultraman.
Yeah, Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, all the old tokusatsu shows.
You explained a little bit that over time, kind of the role they played and how they were perceived changed from basically being made in a cheaper way than other materials like wood and tin to then kind of seeing a boom in the 80s, 90s, and then being a bit like hyped, and now back to trying to focus on independent artists that kind of make maybe smaller batches and smaller releases. Is this where the situation is at today in terms of production?
Today, production is kind of focused specifically on half IP and half independent creative designs. We have companies like Medicom that have licenses for everything imaginable. They actually revealed recently that they're doing sofubi of stuff that there isn't sofubi of, like Chainsaw Man or the Joker and stuff. They are taking the platform and applying it to several licenses that don't have a history with that type of thing. Anime has sofubi of like dolls, but not like tokusatsu and kaiju. And then the creative, the independent designers are all doing small toys that they're either releasing themselves and selling at events internationally, or are collaborating with bigger companies to do collaboration projects. Like there's an artist, Cory who does a cute little, it's a cat with antlers. Yeah, it's a cat with antlers. And that toy was so popular that she actually got to collaborate with JP Post. So at the post office, you could actually buy gachapon of her toy.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what does it take to make this, like time-wise? How long do you need to produce the toy?
So the complexity of each toy determines how long it's going to take. For example, for these, I'll start with, the whole process. You come up with an idea, and then from there, you need a sculpt. It can be either made out of wood or clay. 3D printing is huge now, too, and it's gotten way better than it used to be. This one's made out of wood, this original prototype.
Oh, okay.
This is made out of, Sculpey, which is like a polymer clay. And these are made out of, like, sculpting wax. And you take that prototype, you break it down into the parts. So every single soft vinyl toy, you see they have jointed parts, arms and legs.
Oh, okay.
But you'll see that it's a closed object unless it's a finger puppet. Every single toy needs to have some sort of opening for slush cast production. So you think of the design, I want to make this guy. And you need to think about where it's going to be pulled from. Oh, you can pull from the body, you can pull from the legs. So those need to be separate parts. And if you want articulation, that's a separate part. So then you have the prototype, it needs to be cut into different parts. They can do that at the factory as well, but we advise people to have it kind of prepared so that way they're not surprised if the parts don't look exactly how they imagined. And then you go from that process to making wax. You do wax prototyping, kind of like if you make jewelry. You have a lost wax process where you plate the wax, melt out the wax, and then plate the inside of it, and then weld it onto a frame. Those are then taken and then brought to the factory, and then we can produce the toy from that.
And how long does it all take from start to finish?
For a really simple project, it can take about 6 months. But for really complex projects, it can take 8 months to a year, depending on how many parts, and paint masks too. If things have very clear paint, you need to, once the mold is done, they pull samples and then paint masks are produced. And the paint masks then and that's a whole other artisanal process where they take a pull of the toy, they make a plating of it. They carve out the areas that are going to be the painted areas and leave the areas that are going to be the unpainted areas. And it's just, for example, for Tokyo, we have one place that does it. And it's
only one.
Only one. There's a couple of employees, but there's one shop called Kobayashi that is the only place that does the paint masks. And it's just these artisans where they'll delicately intricately carve out the specific details, and then give you this metal plate that you put on the toy when you paint it. So everything's like timeline. Molds take time. Joints for the arms and the articulation take time. The actual wax takes time.
So I imagine for you then at any given time, you have multiple projects going on at once. Some are like in a ideation phase, some are in a design phase, some are in the creating the mold, and some are in like the more final stages. Yeah, do you have like a typical day?
For the typical day, so for me, I not only do the production side when it comes to design or working with clients as an agent that want to get toys made in Japan, I also work in the factory and pull the toys myself. I do it because I want to learn every step of the process so I can kind of understand if there's a delay, how it can be fixed, to also help with backlog. And also just so I can learn when I'm designing my own toys, oh, well, pulling this thing is a nightmare. How can I make it so it's easier for myself?
So pulling the toy out of the cast, you mentioned that before. I've seen a couple of videos. I was always wondering, how do these like not break? So for people that are like, maybe we imagine like this cup and the toy would be like kind of inside and you have to like grab it with some...
like pliers.
And then just like really pull hard, but like won't the vinyl like rip or?
There's a sweet spot in the cooling process. So to go through the entire process for production, I'll give you an example of my day. I'll wake up and start the fire for the oil bath. The oil bath is where the material is cured. And then once that's up to 180 to 200 degrees Celsius, then we take the molds that we're going to be pulling for the day. For example, this Gankyu toy is on one mold. And I'll have the material, and all the material here comes pre-mixed. It's liquid vinyl, it's liquid PVC. We have 2 major companies that supply it, and it's the thing that a lot of people think about production is they think there's pollution, they think that it's dangerous, you need to wear a mask, because the paint for self-vinyl is famously toxic. So you need to wear like a respirator when you're painting. The actual material for the self-vinyl, I would not advise eating it, but there are no fumes whatsoever.
Okay.
So you prepare the material, you just take like a 20 kilogram can of this liquid magenta vinyl, pour it into a bucket that you're going to be using to fill the mold, put it into a degassing vacuum chamber, get all the bubbles out, and then you start just hand pouring with the bucket into the mold, the figure, put it in the vacuum or a centrifuge, depending on the complexity of the toy. Simple stuff you can pull in a centrifuge and get most of the bubbles out. A lot of the stuff that a lot of Western designers and modern toys, you need to use the vacuum because they have like really weird like areas, like this bottom area here because it goes over, or like run under here could trap bubbles. It's not good for the original like Showa production method. So you then take the material, after the bubbles are out, you then cure it into the oil bath. The oil is a material called toric, which is exceedingly hot, and it's just a weird, like, it comes in a pellet form. It's a weird oil. You cure that for a certain amount of seconds. The seconds that you cure it for determine how thick the vinyl is going to be. So every single joint is made at, it's a tolerance of, I believe, 2 millimeters. So I should have brought an example that had the spacing, but there's a space between each joint, between the actual lip and the actual part. And that 2 millimeters is kind of what you're aiming for to make sure that the toy is jointed correctly and doesn't like pop out or like look awkward. So you cure it for however long it's going to take to reach that, whether it be 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. Bigger toys take longer. You then take the mold, empty out all the excess back into the bucket that you originally poured it out of, and then put it back in the oil to cure. And the curing process will make it so it goes from the liquid to the actual hard, solid vinyl. That hard, solid vinyl, then when the inside gets shiny, you take it, the mold, and you put it into a water bath that cools it down. That's when we do the demolding. And there's this like sweet spot moment. And you can know it's when like the mold stops having steam coming off of it, where it's now hot enough that it's not gonna scratch or get stuck, but it's not so hot that it's gonna stretch and rip. And it's just, every toy is different, every part of every toy is different, and you just kind of get used to it, where you're not ruining the stuff all the time, and everything you make comes out perfect.
So when I saw the video of you doing this online and just kind of like putting the thing from one bath to the other and like upside down, it looks effortless, but everything is actually precisely timed so that you can actually get the toy out in the way that it's supposed to look like and in the right quality so that people can actually enjoy it later and that it doesn't become like fragile or...
Exactly. If you overcook it, the color will change. If you undercook it, there's a very good chance that you could actually have it break. It won't be fully cured. It'll be essentially like pseudo raw at a certain point where it could actually like be fragile and break.
So if we go back a few years, like this is a super interesting and unique process. There are a lot of parts of it that you need to learn. You are back in the States, you want to come to Japan to do this, but how do you even learn it at the time? How do you kind of get into the production process of something that I imagine is probably not commonly done in overseas?
So I had a really bizarre origin story here where I had actually applied to be an English teacher because I wanted to work at a translation company in Tokyo. This was back in 2011. So I had already set up a cell phone. I already had a previous resident card and a bank account. And some things happened. My previous job was I was in the military, and I had a VA, Veterans Affairs evaluation that I needed to actually get done. And I had to be back in the States for like 6 months to take care of that. So I ended up going back to the States after a month here, but all that stuff's still set up. Then I get the bug again a couple of years, 2 or 3 years later, to come back and actually try this toy thing. And because I had all the basic stuff set up, I was able to come here and then start a company without having to go through any weird legal processes. But in between, I was kind of doing nothing. When I was in the States, I had a prototype that I had come up with that I had sent to another producer in Japan to be produced. And it just so happened the moment I was here, the first month I was actually here on that attempt to start the toy company thing, he had just moved studios. So I messaged him and I was like, hey, like, I'm this guy, like, you're the guy that's producing my toy for me. I saw you move studios. Do you need help moving? And he's like, actually, like, I really could use an assistant. So he had just fired his previous assistant. So he was in desperate need of having someone or needing someone to help him with stuff. So him and I met, and he immediately hired me and taught me every single step of the wax production process, taking the prototypes, making silicone molds, making the wax prototypes, and then getting those things ready to bring to the factory. Through him, I met the connections for the factory, the people that actually produce the toys, the people that make the paint masks, the people that do the joints, and the actual mold makers. Him and I went our separate ways due to some issues, and then I took his clients and then did my own independent company. And it took maybe 6 months from me getting here and starting with him to the company paperwork to start the Goto Kaisha being finished, where I could then actually do this as a career, where I'm not like working under like a weird like hobby thing. I can actually like run a toy company now. So it's basically waiting for the paperwork to be finished.
What was the first toy you produced fully by yourself?
Ooh, it's a really, really, really ugly. It's a chochin bakemono. It's a yokai.
Oh, the lantern?
Yeah, it's the lantern, and it's not great. But as much as I talk about how bad the toy is, it was really, really popular when I debuted it because we were doing like really interesting colors, and they were really cheap too. I was trying to not make my introduction stuff expensive because they were like finger puppets. They were easy to produce, but they ended up getting kind of a lot of traction here, and then I started selling in the West. And then from there, I got better at doing stuff. The biggest problem, I said before that I had made a prototype in the States and had hopes to make toys. I have no artistic background whatsoever. Mm-hmm. I can't draw. I certainly couldn't sculpt back then, and I had no eye for design other than good ideas, quote unquote. But I still wanted to make stuff. And then after actually getting in this industry, like actually like working and trying to educate myself on how to do every step of this, it's like, well, now I need to learn how to sculpt better. So then things got better. I made a catfish toy after that. A lot of the earlier toys are like yokai, like the Jishin Namazu. And then I did a Narigama, the weird like rice pot-headed like monk guy. And then transitioned to doing the kaijin and some licensed stuff. But yeah, the first toys I made were really bad.
You mentioned the lanterns were popular at the time. So I imagine there are also kind of shifts in market and the demand for these that kind of maybe changes based on what's popular in I don't know, general like pop culture and so on. How is it for you today? Now you're running a company, you're producing the toys. I imagine it's not just like being an artist where you just create whatever you want. You need to also create something where maybe people will purchase and have demand. What does the market look like today for these sofubi?
When I first started making toys, I was kind of an outlier with the small stuff because it was an era where everyone was making these, we call it the gross toys era.
Okay.
There was a really popular Japanese artist named Shig Arai who used to go by the name Nag Nag Nag. You can probably, I actually passed by some of his stickers in Den Town today. It's the Pill logo from the band Pill with NAG written on it. He made these really gross looking caveman toys, and it shifted the market of people collecting just Godzilla or kaiju to, well, what's this hideous thing? And he blew up, and people started copying him, and people started making things of the same ilk. Like the first toys that I was producing while working with my previous mentor were essentially just people ripping off this guy's art. And it was everywhere, China, America, to a lesser extent, Japan, probably because a lot of the people who were making here knew him. But there was this whole era where it was just big, ugly monster toys. And then it shifted to giant monster toys. And then it shifted again to, smaller stuff. More recently, in the past maybe 5-6 years, you have like the small pocket-sized stuff, because that's when social media propagation for toys got bigger. There's a figure like Cory's little cat with antlers toy, or actually there's another toy called by Konatsu called Negora, which is like this little cat kaiju. And I think a lot of people saw that you were getting essentially free advertising from customers that would buy the toy and just take it with them everywhere, get little clothing for it and take photos of it, like with food or like out at a bar or like anywhere at a park. And a lot of people then shifted from the ugly, gross toys era to the kind of, and I feel we're still in that era of smaller toys that are kind of social media prevalent.
So on the topic, just before we even started recording, you kind of mentioned also Labubu, which really blew up this year, last year, I don't even remember.
Yeah, I think it was earlier this year.
So 2025. And is this considered a sofubi? Is it different? Like how do you like differentiate?
So the original Labubu toy is actually soft vinyl. It's like a normal soft vinyl toy. It's not the one with the fur body. I do believe the faces on the furry ones are soft vinyl. I've never actually touched one of the fur body ones. But yeah, the original Labubu is a soft vinyl toy. Ka-Seng Long, the guy that does the Labubu, has been making soft vinyl toys for a long time. He has a series called The Monsters, the Labubu being one of them. And I don't know why, if it was like he wanted to do like, the Monchichi, where it's like the furry body with like the plastic face, if things are going in that direction with like the cute stuff, but for whatever reason, this furry one really blew up and allowed him to kind of do more with that character that he was successful with the vinyl one, but this is something else. Like they had it in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, there were Labubus, and you can't walk on the street without seeing them now. But it's a designer toy. It's not sofubi. Like sofubi is exclusively a soft vinyl toy, like the kaiju and the Sentai stuff, or anything that's made of soft vinyl. Then you have injection and ABS. I think the Labubus might be ABS faced. I'm not sure, but it's a designer toy, and it's all part of the same like toy sphere of stuff.
You mentioned people collect those toys, sofubi in particular. What are the kind of collections that people are going for? Are there specific themes, or is there like a collector market behind this?
There's a huge collector market for people who specialize in either collecting exclusively vintage toys or exclusively pachi. Pachi is the Japanese word for essentially like bootleg, like the bootleg kaiju, which is actually the current era we're in. We're with small toys and pachi, so much so that what used to be kind of undesirable, like weird bootleg toys, are now highly, highly desirable, and the prices have gone way up. At the Mandarake, you'd see the price of something that used to be 5,000 yen is now like 3,000 yen for the same exact toy. It's because they don't make them anymore, and they're weird and unique, and it's in the zeitgeist. But people that collect, there's a lot of people that have photos of their collections, and a lot of times, if it's a person that only buys, I only buy Godzilla, they'll buy every color of the Godzilla toy, where they'll have 30 of the same exact toy, like the model's the same exact thing, but the paints are different and the material is different. And then there's people with Apache, or people that collect, I exclusively collect old Kamen Rider villain toys. They'll have shelves of just dozens of these tiny little monster men. And a lot of times there are people that just collect everything. I myself kind of have a bit of everything in my house. But when people specialize, they have these amazingly intricately curated displays where they're either displayed by color or model or specifically, oh, these are my expensive, well, there's a thing called one-off with Soft Vinyl Toys, that it's a one-of-a-kind toy painted by the artist. It's usually more expensive, and it's treated more as like an art piece because the artist actually was involved in making this custom design. And some people have just shelves of just those. Some people just collect one-offs. They don't buy any of the normal produced stuff. They just buy the one-offs.
How do you manage this as a business owner that kind of produces them? You mentioned that trends are shifting sometimes fast, influenced by social media a lot, and the market doesn't really have like fixed prices. So sometimes something that is relatively affordable can see its price like go up tremendously, and something that was expensive maybe probably sees a crash. For you, when you're kind of approaching this, like, oh, I need to produce these, how do you adapt, considering it's a 6 months to 1 year long production process for you to kind of release new things?
So the biggest issue that we have for actually coming up with prices is the fluctuating price of the materials used for the creation of the toys, the metal for the molds and the frames for the molds, as well as the actual PVC. PVC being an oil byproduct, stuff like the Ukraine conflict, and essentially anything that affects the price of oil is going to affect the price of those materials. So that is part of coming up with the prices, but all of the toys that used to cost this much and now they cost this much, I'm speaking specifically about the secondary market. Stores that will buy them. You have people that do kaitori, where they'll buy the toys from people that either don't want them or they bought them with the intent to flip them. I think a tenbaya. They buy them just to profit. And those will affect the market. And a lot of artists I've seen will adjust their prices. Oh, like Mandarake is selling this thing for Niman yen. I originally charged Nanasen yen for it. I'm going to make it more expensive. I'm actually, because I'm in a really unique position where I pull all of my own toys and I paint all my own toys. I try to be the antithesis of that, where I will see, oh, this thing's, I charged originally 5,000 yen for it. And now it's 1,500 at Mandarake, or 15,000 at Mandarake. I will then make more of that exact same toy because that shows that there's a demand. Like, the worst thing is seeing them with the sold out marker on those sites or like Yahoo auctions and people buying these things for inflated prices. I will take that as a note to make more of the exact same thing because there's a demand for it and people want it still. And I don't want them to have to pay out the nose to get it. It doesn't benefit me. It only hurts them. And the secondary market is important to our scene. Having toys get hyped up and toys you can actually buy without going to events is really, really important. But I don't want any of my customers to actually have to pay for something that they missed out on. But that's unique to me. Most of the people in our scene do exclusively limited run things, and when they're gone, and then the market prices do whatever they do. They go up and they go down.
You mentioned doing more of something that is currently popular. How often can you reuse a mold to kind of produce, let's say if you want to reproduce those tomorrow, how many more times can you do it? Or do you need to kind of remake a new mold?
There's molds that are at our factory that are older than I am, that are still used. The shop that I work at, I have my own factory as well, but the shop that I operate out of has molds from the Showa era of old like money boxes and old finger puppets that were used as like gift shop just fodder. And those things are so old and they look really bad, but they still pull beautiful toys every time. And I don't know if there's an actual limit to how many you can pull, if there's an actual like definitive lifespan. For example, I think these dogus, I've pulled well over 1,300 of each one, like minimum. And the molds are still just as beautiful as the day I got them. These things are made to last. They're expensive, but that's kind of the beauty of this production scene is you invest in this mold. It's a tool, and it's supposed to last potentially your entire life. And that's part of the job is to keep them clean and make sure that if they need maintenance at all, that you're keeping up with the molds.
So when we were talking about this long production cycle, it's kind of really the ideation to designing to creating the mold and getting it all ready for the moment where you can actually make them. Because once you have that mold, I imagine it's much faster to kind of produce, and you can just reuse as many times as you want.
Once I have a mold, I can produce stuff for a person in a single day. They can send me, we've actually had to do this before. So to go back on the production timelines, when I started, it was like 3 months. And then it went up to 6 months. And now, again, fluctuation because there's bottlenecks everywhere. The paint masks, there's the one company doing them in Tokyo. I'm sure Osaka has another place, but I work exclusively with the Tokyo companies. And then we have mold makers. There's new factories doing production that pop up all the time. And every single day, there's someone that wants to make toys. Every week, I'll get like 6 emails, like, hey, I want to make this thing. And then people kind of get deflated when you tell them about like production timelines. There's always people that want to make, but there's no one making molds. We have 3 major mold makers in Tokyo, one of which is on a break currently until March. But that's a bottleneck. And there's not new mold makers coming up because it's the least luxurious part of the process. Everyone knows the makers. A lot of people know the factory guys. No one knows the mold makers. So no one's really getting interested in wanting to learn electroplating and welding. So those bottlenecks then slow it down to now it's 8 months to a year for certain projects. And then the paint mask, the same thing. So the biggest pain with that is you don't want to see, I don't want to say it's hanging on by a thread, but like we're so worried about these steps that if no one fills in for these steps, that it's going to make this such a slow process that no one's going to want to do it anymore, or make it so it's kind of like a thing of the past. So that's a current issue we're having with the production scene.
But now there is a sort of resurgence in demand as well in the market that may make people interested in kind of jumping into that industry. But as you mentioned, the creating mold is maybe the less attractive part of it. People probably want to design and probably want to be at the end stage. But one of the reasons is just getting popular is through promotion. You talked about social media, but you also mentioned attending quite a few events. What kind of events are you attending, and kind of how do these work?
So there's a bunch of different events that we have in Japan that are kind of broken down into, I want to say garage sale style toy events, where it's half designer toys and half people selling stuff that they bought on Premium Bandai or old toys. That's like a super festival, or we have a show called Junk. That's that type of thing. And then you have shows that are made for artist specific. We just had Wonder Toy Con that happened. Kyoto hosts it in Osaka.
Okay.
And then they also have a thing called SoftCon in March, which is all artist designed toys and very little license. It's all original characters. And then we have my favorite type of event, which is the one-day license event. So something that's unique to Japanese shows is a thing called the Ichinichi Hanken. It's the one-day license for a toy. Say there's something that you want to make more than anything, and you're just an independent maker. You can't usually approach a company and get a license. This event, it's also Kyoto, the same group that does Wonder Toy Con, and they do a lot of the gachapon you probably see. They host Wonder Festival in Tokyo that allows independent makers to come up with, they publish a list every year. And that list will show, these are the licenses we have available. You can apply for other stuff, and they adjudicate on your behalf with the actual license holder. So you can go, for example, I wanted to make toys from Elden Ring when it came out. And it wasn't on the list, but other From Software games were. I submitted it and submitted the prototype photos, and they got the license. And then you have, for that one day, the thing that you sell is an officially licensed product. It's not just toys. You can do other stuff too, but the majority of it is toys. You'll see people apply, and it's really, really specific. people will apply specifically for this version of Godzilla, this version of Ultraman, this version of this kaiju, video game characters, anime characters. It's everything.
How does it work exactly? Because you get a license for one day, but if you want to sell it, you also need to produce it first, right?
Yes, it's a super high risk, high reward event. And I love it because it allows you to do stuff that you could never dream of doing in the States. And even just working here, independent production, you can't really deal with licensors unless you have like a GK or a KK and they're willing to work with you. This is such a opportunity, and a lot of people know that when I say high risk, high reward, you need to have that prototype ready. Like, and if you don't get the license, unfortunately, like you're out the prototype or you're out the molds. So you get the ball rolling when you have the idea, and that's why they publish a list. So it gives you an idea of like, well, I probably will get this if I apply for this, and then you get the ball rolling on the actual production process. There's been times where I will have a mold ready and I still haven't gotten the license yet. And then I find out like, oh yeah, you got it. Like maybe 2 weeks after we got the mold, like way too close to the event. In a normal mind, you would assume I will wait until I get the license and then I'll produce the toy, pay for the mold and the joint and the wax and all that. But then you would not be able to produce the toy in time. And once you get the license, you have to produce it. If you don't, then you're not allowed to participate in that event anymore. I believe it's like a year where you're not allowed to be part of that event anymore if you get a license and you don't actually keep your end of the bargain. So you have to have everything going way well in advance.
In a way, that's pretty cool because these large companies that hold these very strong IPs, as you mentioned, difficult to work with, especially when you're a smaller producer. They don't really have a reason to sell you the rights to produce Godzilla or something like that. But that one event gives you an opportunity to kind of create something from that license and make it official.
And they give you the sticker and everything on your header card. And like in the grand collection of items from this IP, like your thing is an official item. And there's more of these events too. Like we have Hobby Round as well in Tokyo. I don't know about Osaka, but Tokyo has been getting more and more interesting license events. And the Wonder Festival is actually branching out to other countries. I know they're doing China and I believe they're doing America soon.
How is the market or the production kind of holding up? I was watching this video and they were talking about sofubi is not kind of something that is trademarked or licensed as a method. But now there's kind of like mass production version of it, which goes against a little bit the idea of it being like an artist-led, independent, small batch production industry, so to say. Suddenly you have these like huge batches being produced in factories. How does this kind of affect your work?
So the one thing I noticed ever since the second boom of like people like designer boom and like I think it was like 2017 of a lot of Chinese new money getting involved in making toys was a lot of factories in China, which normally do the standard injection or rotation production for mass production. They started copying the Japanese production method of slush casting, where you had these things that looked exactly like Japanese mom and pop factories. And they were using a different type of material, usually like pellets that need to be melted down or like oils and like pigments that need to be mixed. But they were following the exact same steps of the Japanese production because a lot of people want to produce toys in that method. They want this artisanal quality. They want there to be the artisanal quality of the production, but also that kind of goes hand in hand with QC, where a person is always looking at it. It's not a machine that's ripping out 30 of the same toy every second. So a lot of Chinese production facilities started copying the slush cast method because a lot of people wanted to make in Japan and they couldn't afford it, or the timelines were just not, it was too long for them. So obviously they would go and look elsewhere, and that's where China would come in. And there's companies in China that are doing amazing work with small batch toys. There's a company called Gums that does small batch toy runs that follow slush cast and injection molding. They can do everything. So
in the end, the method is the same, just the place of production is different in this case. That's interesting.
Sometimes the materials do make a difference. The materials we have here have no smell and are just, it's like a liquid. It's like almost like, it looks like paint that you're pouring in. Some of the stuff there is oily and has a bit of a smell. There used to be a joke in the community for finding out if it's something that was made in Japan and China. You just smell it to see like, oh, if it has a really rank smell of the oil or if it doesn't smell like anything. But now China is getting better with the production materials.
You said that people are looking for this artisanal quality. If I'm like walking into a store like Denentown in Osaka or Akihabara, or if I go to Mandarake, how can I know from just looking at it or touching it when I see something on a shelf that this is a sofubi or this is something produced like differently? Is there a way to tell?
The easiest way to tell is the mark on it. If it says made in Japan, it's most likely made in the traditional slush casting method. There are places here that do injection. There are places here that do rotocast. But if it's a soft vinyl toy, and Mandarake does a really good job of curating all their sections. If it says made in Japan, it's made in the same method that all of these modern art toys are made in. The most expensive down to back in the 90s when they used to make the Ultraman stuff here. It's all the same process.
Interesting. So people can go and explore these areas and kind of see a little bit what they can find. Maybe they'll find a coffee maker monster, or you also did a rice cooker monster, I think.
Yeah, we got a bunch of... My favorite thing to focus on for my designs is... Because I take my work seriously, but I don't consider myself an artist. A lot of designers and artists that go into this field were artists first, illustrators first, designers first, and then they got into this. I refer to myself as a toy maker because I just want to make toys that are playable and just kind of goofy. So yeah, it's like a coffee maker, a screwdriver. We're doing like a tower, just random stuff with arms and legs. I try to keep my stuff interesting and cheap because the way the market's going with the support of fans and the support of these artists that make the one-offs I was talking about, these one-offs, a lot of times they will be $2,000. You'll go to a show and this person will have maybe 3 of the same toy, and they're all intricately painted and have like modifications done. There's a really famous artist in the West who I actually produce all his stuff, called Mutant Vital Hardcore, and he recently had these super intricately painted doll eye inserted figures that he makes, and he's already popular, but his stuff is usually a couple $100. These are like $2,000 each. They sold out immediately, and there's I think 5 of them maybe. So there's 5 people that can get that. And the pool of people that want that is, let's say, 50. But every time you do that, I feel people get frustrated. A lot of sales for these like hype makers, the people that make the expensive stuff that's in demand, they do a thing called like lotto. They'll do lotto sales where you need to win a lotto to even be able to purchase the product. And you'll find with the expensive ones, you have a pool of people who are interested in buying it, and they either want it because they actually collect it, they want it because they want to flip it for money, or they legitimately, like maybe this is the first, they're not into toys, but this artist, because they make these amazing, intricate toys, they want this as like a piece in their house. They don't care about any other toys, they just want this thing because it's the hype toy. And every time I feel, and there used to be a lot of people complaining on social media about, oh, the lottos are rigged, this person, I'd never win the lottos. Everyone has a fair chance. And it just so happens there's this many people that are applying for it. But every time that a person doesn't lose or a lotto ends, you have people that don't get it and they don't support that artist, possibly. And there's people that stick with it because maybe they won or maybe they think they have better shots. But every time you do that, the group shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until it's not enough to support people that make really expensive stuff. I do feel like a lot of these artists that make the really expensive hype toys, they have sustainability because they have popularity and they make enough numbers to give everyone an equal chance. But the ones that make the one-offs, a lot of times people get frustrated and they run the risk of burning out and losing their customer base or having a small customer base, where if that customer has, they fall on hard times or COVID, they basically lose that customer. The stuff that I'm making, I try, and other makers too, like I know Cory and there's other artists that do and Konatsu that do like the smaller toys. They make them accessible and they make a lot of them so everyone has a chance to get them, whether they want to collect it, whether they just want that one toy, or people that have never collected any of the soft vinyl stuff before they see it. Oh, they can get it. It's 3,000, 5,000 yen. And then maybe they get hooked and they start collecting stuff.
How many people are making those here in Japan? Is this like a known number, or is it kind of hard to estimate?
There's no actual like solid number of people like within Japan that are making. When you say making in Japan, like from the West that are producing here, or like people that live and work
People that are living and working here like yourself, that have a company that is producing...
There's only one that I know of, and it's a guy in Chiba who I'm friends with, and he runs his own factory. He has his own factory, he produces his own stuff, as well as stuff for clients, and also...
He's a foreigner?
Yes.
Oh, and then in the Japanese makers, are there many, or is this kind of also something that is maybe more niche and growing? Or...
There's a couple of Japanese makers that operate their own factories and produce their own toys only. Maybe they'll help friends with some small productions, but they'll produce their own proprietary toys. There's like... I know of about 5 of those, but the traditional model is you have a design, you want to make a thing, and you work with an agent or a factory, and they do all the productions.
I see. We talked about IPs earlier, and I was quite curious about how do you navigate this as a creator? Because it's relatively sensitive, since a lot of it is originally based on IPs at the very beginning of sofubi. You can create your own, but for example, a lot of these are inspired by yokai that are like cultural assets here in Japan, but are some of the things trademarked? Can you easily create designs without having any IP issues? Or is it something that you need to be careful, you need to stay informed?
You need to be careful about certain stuff. There is that gray area called pachi, where it's bootlegs of existing characters. And because Japan already has kind of a culture with that, this is a bad comparison, but think of it like, you ever been to Comic before, or do you know Comic?
I know, but I haven't been. Yeah.
There's like an unspoken rule that you're allowed to do licensed doujinshi there, because that's how a lot of mangaka came up, was drawing other people's stuff. And it's like an unspoken rule that you're not going to get hit with a cease and desist or sued by a license holder doing comics of any existing IP. For sofubi, if you're not doing an actual licensed event or have the license, pachi is really the only kind of gray area that you can fit in. And even there's some stuff that existed and then didn't because it clearly walked way too close to the actual intellectual property. I don't know exactly what the determining factor is for pachi, because they all look like the thing that they're parodying. But if it just is different enough, you're kind of okay. It's super ambiguous, but you just want to be really careful if you're doing anything like that to not go and ape an IP that is super litigious or make it blatantly obvious that you're ripping it off. You want to stay in that gray pachi area where adding extra eyes or like it can look like the character, but it has 2 heads or something. Like you can get away with that for the most part. But yeah, it's dangerous here. They don't have the same parody law protections that they have in the States. And fan art is not really a thing here.
No, it is not indeed. You've been doing this for 12 years here now.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey, I imagine. You didn't get to producing all of these and having this established company immediately, I imagine. You first had the mentorship, then you kind of took over. If you look back at your experience, like what were some of the key milestones, some of the things that took you a lot of effort to overcome and to make Science Patrol into what it is today?
The 3 biggest things that are kind of like core memories for me was learning specifically how to do wax processing, like wax finishing, and making it so you could take a prototype and make an exact replica of it in wax. It's super mind-numbing. It takes forever, and a lot of times there will be changes you need to make. There will be like undercuts or things that don't work in the production method that you'll need to fill in and make it look like that you didn't change it, because when a client gives you a thing, they expect the toy to look like the prototype they gave you. So learning that process and kind of mastering that was one of the first like aha moments of like, oh, I can actually do this. Again, like no background in any of this. I had to learn everything from scratch. The second one was when I had a toy that came out that was successful. The first big successful toy I had was this catfish. And every time I would have them, I'd bring 50 to an event and they would sell out immediately. And then I would do the same color or a different color. And it was just like, oh, people like this stupid idea I had. Like I somehow vibed with enough customers that there are 50 people that have this thing. And hopefully we'll have it for a long time. And then the next one was working at the factory and actually learning the process of this is how you pull these things. Because all 3 of those are really important, but I would honestly say the learning the factory production like the actual demolding in the factory was the most important because it taught me how long it takes to actually make these things. If you're a client and you just do the design and maybe the paint, you put in an order for 100 of this thing. You don't know how long it takes the person and how, for certain toys, how frustrating it might be to pull 100 of these things in the hot summer when you don't have an air conditioner and it's 130 degrees in the factory, or if it's a material that's particularly temperamental with heat, like white or clear. If they're in a second longer, they'll yellow and they'll look really bad.
Wow.
And it's all of these like tricks for how to demold them. But it also gave me a much better idea when I'm designing my own stuff, how to make it easier for me because I'm pulling it, but also to advise my clients and advise. I have a lot of clients who became friends who live here and some that live abroad, where they would consult me about like, well, how should I make this thing work? Like, can I cut it here? How can I break this down to make it less frustrating for the factory and easier overall for the production method?
These clients that are overseas, are they usually designing and making them for themselves, or is it something that they kind of resell as a character, as part of, I don't know, like a comic shop or for events, or is it like individuals that kind of just want to create their own little figure?
I've only had one client that ever made stuff just for themselves. He was this eccentric, I think he was from Spain, and he only made toys just to have. He never sold them. He just had them in his house for display. I don't know what his deal was, but
that's very costly to make just for one, right?
Yeah, he was an eccentric, wealthy person. Nice. But every other person that makes toys is selling them. They will either sell them at events. Everyone in the West that I work with, and even the couple clients I work with here in Japan, they all either have shops or brands that they have characters, like mascot characters, that they produce, or artists in the West that go and do shows in Japan and Asia and America. They will have designs that are sent here that we produce, and then they'll paint them and bring them to events. I don't think there's anyone other than that one guy. He doesn't make stuff anymore that would just make it for themselves. Every person that is doing this, like even if they're doing it artistically, there is a consumerism aspect to it, and there is like kind of the most pure form of artists I know is people like myself and people like a lot of the guys that I work with who have become my friends. They sell the toys because they want to fund making other toys. So they'll be successful and then, oh yeah, here's another 3 prototypes, and then just keep the cycle going where they're constantly making stuff.
I was curious because if this eccentric Spanish person hires you to make a toy that they designed, you have to go through the whole process. You make the mold, you create the toy, but you still have the mold after.
Yep.
What are the rules around, like, would you be allowed to make a second one for yourself? Would you be allowed to kind of, after a certain point in time, create batches of that toy to sell them as a producer? Or
as a producer, like one of the biggest rules is you absolutely do not use anyone's mold without permission, without there being an order, without there being the request for paint masks or a test or something. If I were to reach out to him and ask him, that would be totally okay. But yeah, you would never ever make someone else's product without their knowledge or without their actual consent.
Because those molds end up like piling up, right? They take space. Do you discard them eventually?
We never get rid of them. We have molds that I pulled maybe once, artists that fell off due to not being successful. COVID took out a lot of artists, and we still have these molds. And if they wanted to, and we've had some that come back after 8 years, like, hey, do you have this mold still? I want to pull this thing. And we can still make them. And they look just like they did when they first made them.
That's cool.
It's cool, but you mentioned having mountains of them.
Yeah.
We do. We have massive mountains of molds because of these things. If you recycle them, there's really no monetary compensation if you recycle them. You just basically get rid of them. But molds aren't cheap. They're like $1,000. They're like Juman yen for a mold. And it's made to last. But if a person isn't successful with their toy or they decide not to make toys anymore, a lot of times they are reluctant to get rid of it because of the initial investment. That mold represents the prototype, the wax, the joints, and for a lot of people, the idea, their own intellectual property. So even if they're never going to make it again, a lot of them want to hold on to the mold, not physically. Like we can send molds out of the factory if a person is truly not going to ever make toys again. But shipping's expensive. So a lot of times they just don't want to get rid of it. And they just hang out. And we have piles of molds. It's like a graveyard of molds.
It would be cool one day to kind of take all those molds and make one of each and like put them in a museum as a kind of, this is all the toys I've made in my career.
I've been doing that with my own stuff, but I think when I eventually decide to hang up the hat, I might ask some of my clients, like, hey, can I produce one of these things in the same color just to have like a history compendium of everything I've made?
You mentioned 3 big milestones in your career in establishing yourself. Where is Science Patrol today? What are you working on at the moment? What are some of the projects that excite you for 2026?
The thing we're most excited about is, so we actually just purchased a house/factory workshop/storefront building last year and remodeled it, moved in, and we're getting ready, I believe in March or April. We're going to have a fully functioning factory in the house as well as a storefront where I can sell proprietarily and host events and stuff. So that's the thing I'm most excited about. But I got a couple of licensed projects for Wonder Festival that are brand new IPs that have never been available before that I am dying to post anything about. But there's a waiting period. You have to wait until you can basically produce the finished, colored, the way it's supposed to look product before you can actually post it. So I'm waiting for that to be lifted so I can post these things.
And interestingly, you mentioned to me on that topic that you're not allowed to talk about them, but it's not really written and signed in paper. It's like a kind of handshake agreement that this is a licensed product. You are producing it, but don't tell anyone. Don't talk about it. Don't mention it. Don't show it.
Those rules we apply to independent makers too. There's a couple of unspoken rules that we all understand. One of them is you don't make stuff from other people's molds without their consent. And the other one is you do not photograph any molds or any test pulls of anything on social media. If you do any social media stuff, you have to be very careful and nothing's visible. These artists, again, there's no NDA signed with any of these artists, but it's a mutual respect that they might have something that they want to surprise people with, or they may have an idea. The worst thing would be, for example, if someone saw, let's say someone had a really great idea for like a robot that had like a movable cog in the center that was a separate part and had like a weird complex jointing system, something that no one had done before in this medium. And if someone sees what they think is that in the background of the social media post, they might think, oh, is that what that is? And they might they can 3D print a prototype of pretty much the same thing and try to ape that person's work before they're able to get their finished painted project out. You never want to like ruin someone's surprise. As stupid and non-serious as that sounds, like it's just a mutual respect between the maker and the production people.
Cory, we covered like a lot of topics. Is there anything around sofubi that we didn't really get into that you think is important for people to know we should talk about?
The thing about the hype toy scene, which we talked about before, the one-offs and the people that make the really expensive toys, I talk about it as if I dislike it because that's not the direction that I like to go with toys. I do think a lot of times that stuff does kind of poison the market because so many people will be into it. And take the Labubu, for example. Again, not a soft vinyl toy specifically, but it's a designer toy. They get into it and then every fad ends and then they get burned out and then they're just going to be hanging around. Those types of things, as annoying as they can be because they make the market prices fluctuate or customers lose all their money buying these expensive things and can't buy normal toys, they do help get us on the map. Like the fact that maybe 10 years ago was the first time I've ever seen like soft vinyl like brought up. I think it was 10 years ago. Mark Nagata, an American designer, lives in California, had a gallery event in California, I think San Francisco maybe, specifically about his own kaiju collection of toys and the company that he works with, Max Toy Company. And that kind of it was like the first time I ever saw sofubi and those types of toys like talked about as like art pieces or something more than just toys. And that's not I don't collect the vintage stuff and I don't make that type of toy, but like it brings eyes on this industry and people now have the buzzwords sofubi or kaiju or designer toy. And that leads people to see stuff on social media and people discover other artists through that. So even with the hype toy people and the Labubu people, it all points to other makers. Myself, people that I work with, even major companies like Medicom does a really good job of walking the fine line between normal mass produced. When I say mass, they're all still made in Japan, but they'll do like runs of 1,500 or something. Every single one of them, hand pulled, hand cut, assembled, painted, which is not great. They actually just opened their own factory because of how incredibly busy they are. But you can get those toys for relatively cheap compared to these super expensive toys. Medicom also does the super expensive toys. So you can buy like a $4,000 toy from Medicom, or you can buy a Kyusen yen toy of like a Kamen Rider character or like a Super Sentai villain. And that stuff, all of it all like feeds into the ecosystem where people might not be able to get the expensive, super highly sought after stuff. So they'll buy the other stuff, or they'll see on social media. And social media has been a really good job of kind of leading people to other artists and leading people who collect specific things to me and other makers that make like more inexpensive toys. So they're important to our scene.
Important to the scene, and for people that are interested in seeing your work, we'll make sure that they can find everything with the links in the description. You have a lot of really cool toys on your page, a lot more coming, and people are free to design their own and reach out to have you make them here in Japan. Cory, it was super interesting to have you to talk about sofubi. Thank you very much for bringing some samples too to give us a better idea of what this actually is. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for sticking with us all the way till the end. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the podcast. It helps us improve the show and bring you more in-depth conversations from Japan. Take care and see you next time.